Lesson 7, Part C, will finish up our discussion of the different places in why. So far we've talked about the verb, the object, the complement places. Now we're going to add a fourth place for the particle, and we'll label that as be. A particle is a word that resembles a preposition, but it has a different function. A preposition heads a prepositional phrase. For example, people sit on chairs. On chairs is a prepositional phrase. It tells us where people sit. In the next sentence, boarding houses put up guests, we really have a two-word verb, put up. Generally, put means to place something in a location. We put our book on the table or we put our coat on the hanger. But put up in this sentence means to provide a place for someone to sleep. We can see that we lost the meanings of put and the meaning of the preposition up, and instead we now have something different by combining put with the particle up to create really a new word that means to house. So the up in put up is a particle. It doesn't form a prepositional phrase. I don't mean to put and then I'm going to up guests. It doesn't go that way. So we can see that I can give you some more examples of two-word verbs. For example, took off is a two-word verb and it means to remove. Off is the particle. For example, she took off her scarf and she removed her scarf. There's different kinds of two-word verbs. Our example here in the boarding house and the took off the scarf examples contain particles that can move around the object. So boarding houses is the subject, put is the verb, up is the particle, and guests is the object. We can just as easily say boarding houses put guests up and move that particle to the other side of the object. Same thing with took off. She took off her scarf. She took her scarf off. That particle can move around the object. Not all particles are the same, of course. Analyzing sentences is really the best way to check and see exactly what we're dealing with. Do we have a particle? Don't we have a particle? And it's easy to explain what the meaning of the sentence is by really analyzing and finding the places in the parts of the sentence that we actually have. So if we take a look at she believes in her country, we can do our sentence analysis. We can start with are there any shifters and no. I don't see the X words. I can tell though it's going to be does. Does she believe? She doesn't believe. And now I found my two X word places. She is between those places. It's the subject. And the predicate is believes in her country. The X place, M places are empty. And Y is believes in her country. Believes ties with she. Believes ties with the present. It's the S form of the verb. This is a verb phrase with time. Now we can take our verb phrase with time and rewrite it and do a phrasal analysis. So the Y contains four of its own places. There's a place for verbs like believes. There's a place for particles. I don't see any particle. There's a place for objects. I've labeled that as O, but it's empty. And then in her country is the complement. It's a prepositional phrase. And what this sentence means is that the believing, this action that she does, happens in her country. But we can look at this sentence a different way. So for example, we can say that the sentence level analysis doesn't change. She believes in her country. It's still same ties, same subjects, same predicate. It's still a verb phrase with time, still the S form. But when we rewrite it and we begin to take a look at the Y phrase, the verb phrase with time, we see believes is the verb, in is called the particle, and her country becomes the object, which is a noun phrase, and the complement place is empty. When I do it this way and I call in a particle, this sentence means that she trusts her country. And believe in is a particle that doesn't move around the object. So for example, she believes her country in is not English. So we can see there are some particles that move around the object. There are some particles that don't move around the object. English happens to have quite a number of two-word verbs, and when we start to think about this and realize that the Y contains a place for a particle, and that particles look like prepositions, and we're become sensitive to it, I think that we'll start to realize, oh, we're not dealing with prepositional phrases, we're dealing with two-word verbs. It makes us much more sensitive to what's really happening in a sentence. Now, we have one more particle to talk about. This will go quick. And besides the particles that can move around objects and particles that don't move around objects, we also have a particle to. And when we put the particle to together with a base form, we create what's called the infinitive. Let's take a look. She needs to buy a car. There's no shifters. The X word places are empty. She is between those places. She is the subject. The predicate is needs to buy a car. Needs ties with she. Needs ties to the present. It's the S form. The M place is empty. And Y is needs to buy a car. It's a verb phrase with time. I'll rewrite the Y, the verb phrase with time, and I'll take a look and I'll see where are those four places. Needs is in the verb place. To is my particle, be. And buy a car is the object. That is what she needs. And the complement place is empty. I'd like to just point out that when you have an infinitive and it'll probably wind up being a object. That object is going to be a verb phrase with no time because it's headed by the base form. And now we can start to appreciate that actually English is a lot more complex maybe than we give it credit for. There's a lot going on, and that's why I say it's never really finished, the discussion. But for now, we can say we are done. So let's take a look, and please go to Lesson 7, Exercise 2 now. Let's complete that exercise. We'll have some practice in finding particles, and sometimes they may or may not be there. And then please check your work with the answer key when you're done.